Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Thompson and my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, welcome back. How are you doing?
Yo, what is happening, my man? We had real football in shorts at Highmark Stadium, dude. I'm doing great. There's great football weather in Buffalo today.
Yeah. It was pretty beautiful to see all the highlights and everything out there and the people. More guys showed up for OTAs today. That was kind of fun, being able to go through everything and seeing guys out there. I think there's only 7 guys missing from OTAs as of now, and just looked amazing to see everybody out there. And now seeing both Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders running routes for Josh Allen. That's a fun way to see some football, and I certainly enjoyed it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, I know there's a lot of stuff going on today, more press conferences. We'll talk a little bit about that. If anybody hasn't seen, we have some new work already up on the site, some recaps of the discussions from Leslie Frazier and his comments on Tremaine Edmonds, a great piece by Rob Quinn, another piece by Kyle Silligy, just dropped an hour ago on Dane Jackson. We're going to talk about him a little bit later and some of the comments there. So make sure you're checking out the stuff at cover1.net. We've got some really, really great work going on there. And that leads us into what we're going to talk about tonight, which is the first in our off-season position preview series. And just special for you, because I care about you so much, we're going to start with cornerbacks. And if I told you that the Buffalo Bills have the 22nd highest paid cornerback group in the NFL, would you have been surprised by that?
No, it's super top heavy if we're just talking specific to the cornerback group. And I think that's right, people's frustration, because that sort of top heavy shows up on the field at times, right? Like whoever you have across from Trey isn't stepping up to the level that fans want to. So I think that 22 sounds about right to me when you said that. It didn't throw me off at all. What about you? How do you feel about it?
One, I had forgotten that they reworked Trey White's deal, so technically he only counts 6.7 million. Right. So that was even deflated. If you give his normal, whatever his average salary, the 16.7 or 17 million that he gets, obviously would be higher than that. But it does point out that they're still going with the value route on the rest of the roster. We'll talk through each of the guys, but Taron Johnson's in the last year of his rookie deal. Levi Wallace brought back off of the UDFA range of prices. Dane Jackson in the second year of his rookie deal, and then Cam Lewis, Rashad Wildgoose, Elijah Griffin, Nick McLeod, all UDFAs or 7th round picks. It's not, or I guess Wildgoose 6th round pick. It's not a heavily invested group overall, whether draft pick or money outside of Trey White. And that's certainly been a gripe of many people around Bills Mafia.
Yeah, for sure. But if you're going to have a position, I think, in this football team, which we've seen with the McDermott, Frazier era on defense, cornerback is one that they've been able to sort of milk the most out of these guys that are value guys. And so if you're going to cheap out at a position, I know it's frustrating to fans because it is a passing league, and then you see what the speed of a Tyreek Hill can really do to you, or isolating a Kelsey against a guy that can't defend big people like a Levi Wallace, or even a Dane Jackson would probably struggle with that kind of guy. So you have guys with limitations at that position because you're going sort of that discount route of trying to find those 7th round picks, undrafted free agents, even the aging vets, the Josh Normans, who were once elite talent but lost a little bit. The Bills and their staff, I feel like, believe that they can get the most out of them when they talk about the come to Buffalo and be the best version of yourself. I think it speaks rings the truest at the cornerback position. We've seen it with sort of no-name guys coming into Buffalo, being part of this rotation, making plays, playing better than they really have in other spots. And I think that confidence is what frustrates fans, because you see a Levi Wallace miss on a play, or Taron Johnson early struggling, and then you go and see how little resources they're actually putting into that position. And you had a chance this year, to get one of the top guys in the draft, and you still didn't invest in that position. So I understand the frustration that fans have, but proof's in the pudding with what they've been able to accomplish as an overall defense. And when you look at the years, this past year, they struggled a little bit with those deep, explosive toxic differential plays that we talked about. But the previous couple years under McDermott, it's been one of the, linchpins in this defense is not giving up big passing plays. And it's been with this discount model that they've gone with.
So as we go through each of these position previews, we'll go through the same kind of rhythm, and we'll start talking about the starting spots and going through, is there any surprise or anyone out there that we think is going to go through? So there's 2 starting spots at cornerback. Cornerback 1, do you think it's going to be Trey White?
Well, there's 3 at cornerback because we know nickel's going to be their base, right? So we'll at least say that. But yeah, I think it's going to be the most fun part of this summer is whether or not they add somebody here after the show is recorded. It could be happening right now on Twitter, and we don't know. I think they're going to bring in something to this position
I'd be surprised.
And a little bit more competition, but I'm really excited about this competition. We were talking a little off air here. I love Levi Wallace. I've been pounding the table for my guy all season long. I think he's a lot better than the fan base on Twitter, at least, thinks he is. If you don't have PFF, or if you do, I'm not a big fan of the grades, but if you go over and check out how he positionally ranks up league-wide with the other guys that are on the Bills, I think he's a lot better than you think that he is for a quarterback, too. So if that's the floor, great. What I would really like, and what we were talking about off air, is for Dane Jackson to come out and just ball out, make big plays like he's supposed to, and win this competition over the summer. I think that would be the best case result, because then you have that discount guy, developing on his rookie deal still. And so I think that's probably a little bit of what the Bills are also hoping, where they haven't really brought in anybody to take that job. I think that they believe in the Dane Jackson more. So I don't think this is a competition that's going to get solved early in training camp. I think this is going to be one that rotates back and forth for a long time. I think there's a couple others that we'll talk about here throughout, but this might be the hottest contested one throughout the entire summer.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they go about it. And that, I think Levi Wallace has the head start. I think he comes in. If they're tied, I think Levi keeps the spot.
Sure.
But, after the comments today, you heard, Leslie Frazier talking about it. I encourage you guys again to read, Kyle's piece about Dane Jackson. They're similar size athletes. They're similar athleticism. Jackson certainly plays with an aggressive edge that you don't always see from Levi Wallace. And I think that's higher upside in maybe making a couple more aggressive plays, going after balls, really making a play on the ball to either make a pick or break it up. It can also lead to some, maybe over aggressive, getting bit on a double move, or not making the tackle and having a guy break out and going long. So it's something he has to control. But I do think it's interesting to be able to see. And if you talk about long-term structure, Levi was brought back on a cheap deal. And he was brought back, but it is still a contract year. We don't have him under contract next year. We have 2 more years after this year. We have 3 years left on Dane Jackson's rookie deal, very cheap. There's a long-term incentive to Dane Jackson winning that job and having somebody under contract in a very reasonable deal. And I do think that there's maybe some rooting interest in being able to do that. But the good part is, in the same way that last year we talked about how, hey, having a Josh Norman isn't terribly exciting, but there's a low floor, because the worst case scenario is you could bring in Levi Wallace and you have a safety net. They're not obligated to stick with him year long and let him just struggle through learning curves and things like that. You're in the same boat with Dane Jackson, that, hey, if he's flashy and shows a little more upside and earns a starting spot, and then in the first week or two, it's just not panning out, we need to go back the other way. They have Levi Wallace still. Like, that's a great safety net to have there. And, we've both advocated for Steven Nelson and Richard Sherman, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I won't be shocked if there's another veteran in the room somewhere to work for it. But as of right now, I would say I think I might bet on Dane Jackson to be the first guy out there week 1.
Yeah, so this one's going to be tough, though, for me, because I agree. I think there's rooting interest in Dane getting that spot. Levi is a difficult guy to overcome, to sort of, if they're tied going in, truly tied going in, what makes Levi difficult to take that job from is consistency, right? Like, he won't make those flash plays, but I think people talk about him getting really burnt and toasted. I think that's pretty overrated. He's a consistent tackler. He understands the defense, the communication. Oh, sorry. Well, in my throat. But anyway, he's going to be tough to steal the job from.
Yeah. Well, and it's that kind of player that Leslie Frazier talked about earlier today, in that, whether it was, the EJ Gaines, whether it was, initially, you're talking about Vontae Davis was brought in to be that guy. And then Josh Norman, and year after year, there was a veteran there that they put in place to be able to come in and be the guy. And it's not fair or accurate to say that, well, Levi beat them out. Sometimes it was Vontae Davis literally retiring at halftime. Sometimes It was EJ Gaines couldn't stay healthy, and then Josh Norman couldn't stay healthy. But then once Levi got on the field, it was hard to take him off because he was doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And, I think that kind of trust and reliability is really valuable. And I do think Dane has a shot to beat him, but I do think you're right. I think he has to outright beat him. I think he has to be better, not by a tiny little bit. He has to be better. And I am predicting I think he will be, but he has to be better than Levi Wallace to take that job.
Yeah, and it's going to be with making plays. Like you said, like if he can be known for being a guy that breaks on the ball at the right time and taking the ball away, that's going to be hard for Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier to take off the field, because that's exactly what they were missing a year ago from quarterback too. So they talked about wanting Levi to do that. He really never took that step in his game. Maybe he does this year, but whoever is the guy that's breaking up passes and coming away with interceptions, I think is going to be the guy that they roll out at cornerback too, because I think they know they need a little bit more edge out of that position.
So obviously on the other side of the outside is Tre'Davious White. We're not going to spend a ton of time about, talking about him tonight. But, he did sign his long-term extension. Right. So we're now looking at a guy that we have under contract for 5 more seasons this year and 4 more years. This year is technically kind of compounding onto what that 5th-year option was, the way they structured it and added some signing bonus to last year and shuffled it around. They restructured this year to knock the costs down, but still have him this year and then 4 more years after this. We're going to have Tre'Davious White here for a long, long time through his age 30 season. I think he had a nice year last year. I think he stepped back up. Some people thought maybe he took a little step back in 2019. He was still very good. I think he jumped back up, and that, if you listen to any of the other podcasts around, one of my favorite ones is the Athletic podcast with Robert Mays and Nathan Tice, and they had Lindsey Jones on, and we're doing kind of a non-quarterback draft of going around the top 25 players in the NFL that they would take on their teams. And Trey White was right there in that discussion of the kind of guys that you're talking about, that he's in that top 4, 5, 6 cornerbacks in the league, and the kind of guy that you want to have around. He's good in zone. He's good in man. He's a good tackler. He's great in the locker room. He's a great leader. He's just a guy you don't have to worry about on this roster for years to come. And that, obviously there's not that much to talk about with him because he's so trustworthy and such a lockdown piece in that defense. But, do want to just reference the fact that this cornerback group starts and ends with Tre'Davious White and everybody else plays off of him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the entire defensive backs, I think if you asked Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, even the impact that Trey has on the passing game and the way teams attack the pass against the Bills, it's outstanding. And you brought up the point of him being both good in zone and man. And that's something I think a lot of those top cornerbacks, it's all about playing man and getting up and pressing your guy and winning one-on-one, which is great. And the Bills would love the ability to have that at a quarterback too, so they could do it more. Trey can play some man, but I think his ability to play at an elite level, also playing zone, is what makes him so special in this league, because I don't think a lot of guys pride themselves on their ability to play zone, and he understands his role and he understands this defense, and you would never hear him complaining about going up against the best wide receivers in the league and playing well in a zone scheme. You know what I mean? And that takes a special type of guy. You get a lot of these top cornerbacks and they're so ego driven and they just want to man up and deal with what they have to deal with. They don't want to play a zone and have to deal with other people's responsibilities and coverages, and that ego doesn't allow it. Trey has a huge personality and maybe one of the best entertainers in the game, but you don't see the ego side of his huge personality and the huge, fantastic talent that he has. So it's really, he's the the crown jewel, in my opinion, of this Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane era. When you've had me pick, when we talked about at the end of the year, 3 out of 4 years, he's been my best player for the Buffalo Bills until Josh Allen took this big step. So he really, in my opinion, he's the crown jewel. And I think the defense, because it revolves around the defensive backs, really revolves around Trey White.
And it's spot on the way that you described the little things that he allows Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer to do, leaning a little bit the other way in coverage, just a couple extra steps they can give Levi or Dane Jackson, or just being able to help out Taron Johnson a little more aggressive and blitzes to that side. He just gives gravity in the field. It just tilts everything because of what he's able to do. So it's a great luxury to have him. Again, the Bills have him under contract this year and 4 more years after this, and that's a fantastic thing for everybody related to the Bills.
Yeah.
And you're right to talk about it in a starting spot that the other nickel corner spot is a starting spot. And sometimes as much as 90% of the reps, we have a guy out there. And that guy's been Taron Johnson. And he really, obviously last year wasn't perfect. He started out a little bit rough to the point that they even felt necessary to give Cam Lewis some run. And I don't know if that was a wake-up call. I don't know if that was just kind of the shot in the arm that Taron Johnson needed. But from that game on, he really took a material step forward in both consistency and obviously the big plays. And making 2 of the biggest plays of the season in the pick 6 against Pittsburgh and the pick 6 against Lamar Jackson in that Baltimore playoff game were, season impacting plays. And, for where he started the year to where he ended the year was really, really impressive. So I certainly am excited about him in this 4th year in our system and him being ready for his contract year and seeing him. I'm ready for guys that are in a contract year that want to ball out and get their big money deal. God bless him. I'm ready for him to do that and ready for him to do it as part of the Bills. And then I don't know how I feel after that. I'm so curious what we do with him, but I'm excited that he's our starting nickel this year. And I don't see, honestly, anyone who's going to push him for that's on the roster as of now.
No, I mean, in a perfect world, it'd be nice if Wild Goose had a incredible camp and showed some flashes and maybe pushed throughout the year that whenever Taron was struggling, there was a guy to come in and feel excited about. I think that's a perfect situation, right? Maybe Cam Lewis can challenge again in that role. We saw him sort of, like you alluded to, he came in and took that job before getting hurt. It didn't look fantastic when he was out there, so I'd like to see more of him. But Taron Johnson has been another fantastic get for the Bills since he's gotten here. He did have a little bit of a rough start. He gets targeted a lot. The slot is tough in the NFL, right? Like, it's probably the most difficult position to really process in the NFL because you're dealing with so much space on the outside, on the boundary. You can play to the boundary, right? And in the slot, you're dealing with guys like a Tyreek Hill, some of the most shifty wide receivers, and they have space. And you're dealing with, there was a little bit of turnover early in the season at the linebacker position. I think that people discredited a little bit how much that meant to also the trickle effect of not having Matt Milano, of not having Tremaine Edmonds earlier, Tremaine Edmonds not playing full health. I think that trickle effect in zone coverage between passing off to linebackers from Taron and understanding where people were supposed to be, those types of things played into the defensive struggles that we saw both in the run game and the pass game early in the season. When we saw the linebacking start to play a little bit better, that's when we saw all these guys, these Levi Wallaces, Taron Johnsons, also started to play better. Their seasons went in the right direction as well. I think, again, just like we talk about Levi, there's some consistency things that are really nice about Taron. He's a consistent run defender. And since we play a lot of nickel, you're going to have a lot of responsibility in that run defense. So whoever comes in after Taron leaves is going to have to be similar to that, maybe even a little bit bigger in size because Taron plays bigger than he is. So
96 tackles is no joke.
It's no joke. And when you look at what he's asked to do, I mean, we're talking just out of slot corners. PFF has him at 432 coverage snaps only. That leads the league by 20 something almost. And so he is playing more snaps than any of these other defensive backs. He's out there all the time. He's a big part of this defense. I hope that he can have the consistency that he had in that second half of last year.
Yeah.
He's not a great player. So I think if he can have that consistency, maybe some team would come on those big plays you talked about and overvalue him because those plays are in everybody's mind. But I think if he has kind of that consistent play, that the Bills would be able to retain him, and I'd be happy to just continue to retain him and keep him while he's young, because I think he's the perfect slot corner for this defense. You'd like to see maybe a little more speed to play that man-to-man, but I can't see, with the way they go this discount route to get corners, I can't see them all of a sudden getting elite athletes that are going to allow them to play a ton of man. So I think Taron is in the cards for a long time for this defense. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, and the interesting part is, there's a cap. If somehow he had some amazing season,
Sure.
I guess he could price himself out. I think that it's going to be the Bills' choice of, do we see more first half Taron or do we see more second half Taron? Because if
Sure.
we see more second half Taron, and if you tell me that we now need to pay him 3 years and $21 million, something like that, it's a $6 or $7 million a year deal, I could live with that. I think that's a fair deal for a solid average starting nickel cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about right. If it's below that and he's playing more like the first half, and maybe they're rotating in some other guys, or we see some of these other guys we'll talk about here in a second starting to get some reps, then you're probably talking more a 1 year deal, and it's really just kind of, patching it together, seeing if you can try it again.
Yep.
But I'm open to that. If he plays well down the stretch, the last half of that season, he played like a long-term piece you want to plan around and that you want to re-sign. And nothing speaks to that more than that game-winning play in the playoffs. 101-yard interception return is as big of a play and the biggest moment you can ask for. That's the kind of play, and that was purely a heads-up play that he was reading the quarterback properly. That wasn't an accident that fell in his hands. That was him baiting a quarterback who was the defending MVP of the league, that he baited him into that and then picked it off and took it back in a critical moment. That's the kind of play and the kind of guy that you want to have around. He just needs to have it more, not those kind of plays, but just keep that second half consistency throughout the year, and he'll get himself a nice contract.
Yeah, absolutely. And he makes a lot of big plays too that people don't remember, blitzing, right? And just creating pressures, getting in the run lanes. Like, he made a couple big run stops throughout those playoffs. And those things don't always show up in box scores. It's just another tackle, but it's one of those tackles, however many you said he had for the year. It's, again, the overall consistency. Even if Wild Goose came out and have a good camp, Johnson's going to be a hard guy to beat right now for that position. I think he goes into the year holding on to that starting spot, and unless, again, that first half of the year where he's just being targeted constantly, and he didn't really give up a ton of big plays, but it was just the inability to stop a team from targeting you and becoming that weak link. If that happens, I can see him kind of switching it out, but as long as he doesn't remain the weak link in that defensive backfield, I think he'll be able to hold on to that job for the year.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to do it. Just looking at this, he had 61 pass rush reps and created 11 pressures off of that, and that's a great ratio.
He's great at it. I love it.
Yeah, we usually talk about 1 in 10 is a great ratio for defensive ends and pass rushers. So 1 in every 6 is great. That's actually really, really well. It means he's creating impact when they do blitz him off the edge. That's about all you can ask for. And the fact they did it 61 times means that they trust him to do that.
Yeah, he's good at it. It's the way he fires that gun, man.
The air clubs.
Lit that way, right?
So the next one we want to talk about is, obviously, new additions is not going to be the same at every position. And here at cornerback, it wasn't exactly the offseason that everybody envisioned. Both of us had been advocating and open to cornerback being one of the top 2 or 3 draft picks in the draft. We designed and talked about free agents we could target. There are still free agents that I wouldn't mind targeting. Right now, the only new additions to this cornerback room are 3 guys who are rookies this year, and I'm going to lump them together pretty consistently because depending on which rating service you look at, some are rated higher, all 3 of them. Obviously, the Bills prefer Rashad Wildgoose because they drafted him and then signed Elijah Griffin and Nick McLeod. The Draft Network has Griffin ranked higher, and Pro Football Focus has Nick McLeod rated higher, and the Bills obviously had Rashad Wildgoose rated higher. There are some questions on consistency. I think all 3 of them have a shot at the roster. Obviously, Wild Goose has a leg up, being that he was drafted by the team and has a more consistent contract, although UDFA still have 4 years of contract control, just like we had with Levi Wallace. Looking at the way the roster is structured, I do think one of these guys makes it. I do think that they keep another guy here and that it's likely 6 cornerbacks, depending on what you count. I'm counting Saran Neal, or 5 without Saran Neal. And that I think if you add in Cam Lewis as the incumbent already being on the roster, I think one of Cam Lewis, Rashad Wild Goose, Elijah Griffin, and Nick McLeod are going to make this roster. Do any of them strike you as more intriguing than the others to have a shot at this back end roster spot?
I am most intrigued by Wild Goose. I think when Damon was on, was that just last week? Damon? Yeah. Weird. It feels like longer ago than that.
But we're gallivanting around a vacation
That's right.
in between.
Yeah. So I will say, I think what he talked about in that kind of dog mentality and how aggressive he is, I want to see that harnessed. I want to see that the coaches take a guy like that just seems not like an entirely raw prospect, but a pretty raw prospect that is overly aggressive. But if you can harness that aggressiveness, he's kind of exactly the guy you're looking for. I want to see that project develop. So he's a guy I want to see slide into that final spot and just be molded. And I think this is, we talked about the wide receiver room being a really good room for the Bills to come into. If you're on the Bills and you come into that room being somewhere you can develop. I don't know that the Bills have as good of a room at the cornerback position, but I think it is a good room. I think Levi Wallace has seen a lot of football. I think in Trey White's short career too, he's seen a lot of football. I think you have guys that are willing to teach. I think Trey White's a great leader. We talked about that. So you're bringing these young guys into a room where you have guys that are clearly competing for spots, but I think that Wild Goose can come in and sort of learn the game for a year or even 2. And I'm really excited about that development. Now, as far as the undrafted guys, these are guys, again, I think I agree with you. Wild Goose has the leg up in this race because of the asset that was used on him, where these other guys can probably fight out a Cam Lewis for the practice squad. And I know UB fans won't want to hear that, but I think we probably judge him a little bit higher than maybe he is in comparison to some of the other talent now that they're bringing in. So I think, they're really hanging on, fighting for those practice squad spots, which will be a fun battle. I think that's a battle that's going to be interesting to watch because we see it every year. We talk about that, practice squad doesn't matter, but I think at positions like cornerback, it specifically matters the most, that depth there.
Dan Jackson said on practice squad for a long stretch last year.
It always pulls up every year. I feel like running back and cornerback are positions that you have to have some depth on because guys are getting hurt and you have to bring guys along out of the practice squad. Offensive line is another one. So I'm interested to see how this bottom of the roster shakes out, but I'm most intrigued by Wild Goose, I think, by far.
So, and another way to look at that, Wild Goose is also, pretty solidly the best athlete at corner. Not Trey White, but of the rest of the guys,
sure.
Ran a 4.41 at one point in a pro day workout and just had very solid workout numbers, good explosion drills. And everything you hear about him is that, he's good. He's really physical. He's probably too physical. He's probably too handsy, too aggressive making plays on the ball. Well, if you're going to tell me you get to work with, Babbage Jr. and Leslie Frazier and, Sean McDermott and kind of hone those skills, that's intriguing to me. And that I think that's an interesting way to go about this. And that I think you're spot on the way that you structured it I think there's one roster spot and then probably 1 or 2 practice squad spots from this group. And that, I'd be perfectly fine if Elijah Griffin or Nick McLeod make a practice squad, or Cam Lewis and Nick McLeod or Cam Lewis and Elijah Griffin. Right. But I agree. I do think that Rashad Wild Goose has a legit shot to make this roster. I think he might be the early season game day inactive. Yes. If he can carve out a role on special teams, maybe he gets game day active later on in the year. But I do think that this 5th corner, especially with how many reps Saran Neal plays, and that last year, honestly, besides Saran Neal and a little bit from Taron Johnson, there weren't a lot of special teams reps from the cornerback group. And obviously you're not going to do it with your starter. So if Dane Jackson wins that spot, he's not. If Levi Wallace wins the starting spot, I do think we could see special teams reps from Dane Jackson. But if the other way around, obviously Dane's not, and Levi's obviously shown he's not twitchy enough to be a special teams athlete. So, that's Wild Goose's path to a roster or to a game day active spot. But right. I do think he has the leg up on the roster spot and being able to make it. And although it'd be a good story with Griffin or McLeod, I would right now project that it's Cam Lewis on the practice squad, maybe McLeod or Griffin, and Wild Goose on the roster.
Yep, I agree. And I have a for future when we do new additions, we should play like Candy Girl or something just to segue in.
Yeah, no, I like it. So as we go through, and I mean, we got Warren G's son here, so we could probably
maybe he can write us a jingle,
do a remix or something.
Yeah, right.
So the last one that comes up, we talked about the roster battles and those guys making it. As we go through each of these positions, we'll ask, are there any additions needed? Is there anything else that we can do to round this out? Obviously, there are still some guys out there, and we've rattled through a fair amount of them. I think people were expecting that this June 1st deadline was going to be just a rampant spending spree, and all of a sudden, all of the guys were going to sign immediately afterwards, and that clearly hasn't happened yet. But cornerback, in my mind, is one of the better remaining positions in that, whether it's, at the veteran end of it, which is somebody like Josh Norman maybe coming back, or a DJ Hayden, obviously the highest thought of veterans still out there is Richard Sherman, or some guys who, maybe unfairly got released later than expected and haven't gotten a market, like a Bashad Breeland, like a Steven Nelson, or guys that are strong in the nickel, like Brian Poole or Buster Screen. There's some talent out there. There's some guys out there that, like you brought up earlier, every year we've had Avonte Davis, or we've had a Josh Norman, or we've had an EJ Gaines. I'm a little bit curious. Sometimes it's Captain Munderland, and it's just training camp, and they don't make the roster. I'm really surprised we haven't seen any move yet here. I obviously would like Steven Nelson. I think he's one of the few guys. Him and Sherman, I think, come in and just take the starting spot day one. But I like Nelson because he also has nickel versatility, and if something happened to Taron Johnson, he could kick inside, and then you bring in Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace outside. I don't know if I'll predict it. I think he wants a commitment of a starting spot. I think he wants more money than what he's going to get, but he's the name that sticks out to me out of that group.
Yeah, so I agree. I think Nelson is the guy that probably gives you the most upside right now, today, right? But you're going to pay for it, and I think he wants you to pay a premium, which I don't know that that's available to him right now. He might have to take another prove it deal, which might work out in the Bills' favor, and just do a prove it deal. And that might be the game of chicken right now that Brandon Beane and Joe Shane are kind of playing with him. Like, well, because Sherman's still out on the market, they can be confident that they can walk away with a guy like that and not have to overpay. But I think that market gets a little sketchy to me for him because it seems a little desperate, in my opinion, if you're going to overpay for him. I think he could be a nice piece. I agree with you. There's some versatility. There's still some upside in his game. He provides more athletically than a Richard Sherman or any of these other vet names. So I get it, but I think it discounts maybe what they see future ahead in this next draft class or in the next wave of free agency where, you overpay for that guy because it's a perceived need today. I think you're going to overpay versus what you'd be able to get if you just wait that out. And again, our floor is Levi Wallace, and I know fans don't want to hear that, but I believe the Bills feel comfortable going into the season with that being the floor. Dane Jackson doesn't win the job, and Levi's running it back. And at worst case scenario, where you were a year ago, which was really fantastic defense all around. So I think the Bills have the upper hand in all these negotiations. I think that they're comfortable to go into the year like this. I think there's our guy. I'm thankful there's guys like Joe Shane. They're keeping, Brandon Beane talks about how they keep him level and not going out and overpaying and getting all these shiny new toys. So I think that's the game they're playing right now. I think they're on the phone with Richard Sherman's, with Steven Nelson's. They're calling the Eagles for these Ertz trades that we're thinking of. They're trying to put this all together. But that might be some of what's in play here too, is there's this Ertz thing kind of hanging out in the background. And if they land that, they might not be able to pay a Nelson and have to bring in another vet. So that might be the chip that has to fall before we start to see moves fall. And I think once league wide, really, once you start to see some of these moves happen with Julio moves, then you'll start to see different pieces start to fall into place. But it's going to take that first one. And maybe it's going to be the Bills here with Ertz tonight. Who knows? Sure. But until that happens, till moves start to happen, I think it's going to be a frustrating waiting game, but I guarantee you they're on the phone with cornerbacks trying to get another addition to this room. I'm expecting somebody else added.
I'll go as far as I would guarantee they have insulting offers standing with multiple guys that they've made really cheap. I'd be like, hey, guys, we can't spend the money, but if you want to come on a cheap deal here, we're welcome to have you. And they've made that to a handful of guys.
Sure.
And that those guys, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm not here to tell guys that they should play for free or play for cheap when they think they're worth a certain amount. And that we knew there was going to be more talented guys this year than mid-level contracts to go around. And that, honestly, Pittsburgh kind of screwed over Steven Nelson, releasing him after that first wave of free agency had happened and that money had been spent. He would have been an $8 or $10 million, cornerback, and that a lot of the teams that would have done that already spent that money, and that he lost the game of musical chairs, and now he's hurt by that, and that he wants money, and that
I'd love to take advantage of that,
and that. Is there a way that they can structure with a couple void years a deal that makes him feel like he's getting $6 million and we squeeze it in for $2.5 million this year because we've spread out some of the other money? Sure, we probably could, but at some point he's going to have to choose to sign with the team to get film this year to make some money and then to try again next year, and that countdown to training camp starting. There's going to be guys out there who sign for shockingly low money, and that we're going to see, oh my gosh, I can't believe Sheldon Richardson signed for only this, or that, these other guys that are out there, oh my gosh, I can't believe Trey Turner is signing for $2 million here. I don't know. We're not going to get as many as what fans like. I do think one or two of those are going to be with the Bills, that there's going to be a handful of guys that eventually all right, I got to earn a roster spot here. I got to put some good film up. I got to find a way to earn the contract I think I deserve next year. Screw it. I'll go to a good team like Buffalo at certain positions. There are positions we're not getting any, free agent wide receivers signing with the Bills because they know they're not going to have a path to reps. But cornerback, tight end, defensive tackle, some of those where a guard maybe that their agent could say, listen, you could beat these guys out, you could earn a starting spot here
and be on primetime TV all year in big games, probably
surrounded by talent
into the playoffs.
You're how hard is it to look halfway decent as the other corner in a secondary that's Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, and Trey White?
If you ask Twitter, difficult. It'd be very
and don't get me wrong, you do get targeted. You do get targeted a little bit more, but it's just that there's opportunity here, and there's a chance to be able to do that. And I'm not sure where it comes from, but I do expect a couple more names to be added here to be able to go through. We got a couple questions in the chat. EJ Gaines was released. He did opt out of COVID, but when he came back and his contract told over in January, he got released, and he technically is a free agent. I'm going to assume that he's going to struggle to pass a physical at this point. But yeah, sure. I mean, he's still a name that's out there. There are other guys on that list that we mentioned, names that you would recognize from previous years. Artie Burns is still out there, and Phillip Gaines is still out there. EJ Gaines is still out there. Daryl Worley is a guy that was brought in for workouts previously. There are names that are out there. Sure. None of those guys are coming in to earn a spot.
But you'll see those names get workouts throughout the spring and summer.
Bosby was a guy that we saw Stephon Diggs roast in Denver.
Yeah, and you'll see those guys get workouts because of when injuries pop up. They'll call a Worley. They'll call one of these guys that have had before, where you just want to get your eyes on them, see if they can do anything. But if they bring in an EJ Gaines for a workout, it's not to compete for any type of starting position on this team this year. I do think, too, you're going to run into some of the guys like a Richard Sherman, some of these older vets. These guys aren't really particularly in a rush to get on a team either. I don't know that they're even looking for the biggest deal. They're just not in a rush.
Or don't want to be there for every week of training camp.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's a different NFL nowadays, and people were frustrated with Star Lotulelei not being at OTAs and things like that. Like, this world of NFL athletes, if you follow any of these guys on Instagram, I'm not worried about them being ready to go when it's time to go, especially the vets, the guys that they know the process of what it takes to get ready for an NFL game. I don't care if they show up at training camp or halfway through training camp. These are the type of players that you just kind of build into. So some of these vets might just hang out for the summer, be vacationing with their family while they're working out and just waiting for the right deal to come up to a contender. And I think to your point of saying the Bills are going to get some of these guys on some of those low deals, there's only a handful of better looking situations on paper than come into play for the Buffalo Bills. Everything right now for Buffalo Bills in terms of optics league wide is trending up. Good young coaching staff, great health facilities, players rave about the place. Josh Allen trending nothing but up. It's a quarterback driven league. So it checks all those boxes for years that the Bills couldn't check. We can maybe
always
check
had to overpay, always had to beg.
Yeah. Please come play for us. Now you're going to really have some of these players heavily considering it when they're also thinking about teams like Kansas City, Tennessee, the Browns, any of these bigger teams that are also contending. I think you're going to see the Bills landing some of these guys, like you said, just based on the situation that they're going to provide.
Well, and we even saw that already with some of the guys that the Bills were able to add, and whether it's guys returning like Levi Wallace, like Isaiah McKenzie for cheap, or that you were able to add guys like Matt Breida and Forrest Lamp and Jacob Hollister and Terrell Adams for minimum deals who, those are guys who were starting in for their teams the previous year, and they were able to add for nothing. It just no downside in contracts like that. It's certainly valuable to be able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So tonight, again, was our first in our position preview series. We're going to go through these as we lead you all the way up to training camp and back into football. We're going to go through each of the defensive position groups. We're going to be talking about even the coaching of front office and the guys that are there to be able to talk through who are in leadership positions in the organization, all the offensive positions, and be able to talk through the same kind of cadence as we go, the contract status, new additions to the team, roster battles to make the team, starting battle spots to be able to earn the starting spots on the team, and just kind of keep you up to date on everybody that's here with the Bills and get you ready for this 2021 season. We also are going to have awesome coverage on the site. Make sure you're checking out great work already from Rob Quinn and Kyle Silogy and our new intern Liam Kearney, just putting out great work already. You're going to be really excited to see everything they do. Make sure you're checking that out at cover1.net. Check out the memberships. Their work is going to be free here in June, and then it's going to be going into the premium service. Make sure you're checking that out. Give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review. It really makes a big difference wherever you're at. Let somebody know about what we're doing. Leave us a review on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you're checking us out. It really, really means a lot. We would appreciate it. Aaron, where can the people find your good works?
Only leave us nice reviews. If you're going to be mean, reviews. Just keep it in the YouTube comments like all the other mean people.
If you're going to say mean things, go tell Drew and Chris at Rock Power Report. Leave them a bad review about us. That's totally fine.
Totally. And also, thank you for teaching me how to say Kyle's last name, because forever in my head it was like Salagi. So I appreciate it. It sounds better. Silogy.
Yes, Silogy. I had to learn. It's a soft G. I had to ask him and practice it a couple times. Kyle Silogy, great writer. He's going to do a great job for us.
Sounds way fancier than Salagi. So he's a much fancier guy. Now you can find me on Twitter at AaronQuinn716 and here every week doing these positional breakdowns. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. Come find me at Greg Thompson, GregTompsett. Always having a good time messing around on Twitter, talking with everybody in the Cover One Premium Slack channel. You get access to that as well and hang out with us and talk with us back and forth. But tonight, I have been Greg Thompson on behalf of Aaron Quinn. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are